No one noticed her. No one ever did. Not when she swept the marble floors before sunrise. Not when she wiped the fingerprinted glass doors. And especially not when she stood silently in the corner of the grand lobby as executives breezed by with their lattes and leather briefcases. Her name was Angela. But around here, she was simply the Maid. The building was a fortress of power. A corporate empire stacked 30 floors high with ambition and greed. And Angela, with her worn-out shoes and gentle eyes, moved through it like a ghost. She'd been cleaning the same offices for 6 years, and yet no one knew anything about her. Not even her last name. That's how they liked it. Invisible, efficient, replaceable. But today was going to be different. It started with a paper. Just a single sheet that drifted off the top of an intern's binder and slid across the floor like a leaf in wind. Angela reached down, picked it up, and turned it over in her hands. She wasn't trying to snoop. She was trying to be helpful. But that was her first mistake. You shouldn't be touching that. The voice behind her was sharp, slick with arrogance. It was Mr. Howard Bennett, the CEO himself. He was a man who wore power like a tailored suit. Everything about him was sharp, his jawline, his tone, his temper. And Angela, standing there with that one flimsy paper in her hand, had unknowingly stepped on the tripwire of his pride. She began, but he didn't let her finish. Do you understand what's on that paper? He barked, snatching it from her hand. You think you're doing me a favor? Angela said nothing. Her silence only fueled his fury. You people don't get it. You're here to clean, not to touch things you don't understand. Do your job and stay out of the way. A few gasps echoed from the nearby employees who had stopped to witness the spectacle. Most turned their heads. A few smirked. And Angela stood there, humiliated, heart-pounding. She should have walked away. That's what she always did. But something inside her snapped. She looked him in the eyes. Really looked. And then she said one sentence. A sentence that would echo through those corporate walls for days to come. The difference between you and me, Mr. Bennett, is that I clean messes. I don't create them. The silence that followed was deafening. The elevator chimed. A phone buzzed. But in that moment, no one moved. Mr. Bennett's face froze. His mouth opened, then closed. No words came out. Angela turned, picked up her cleaning cart, and walked away. But the story didn't end there. Not even close. Because that one sentence, it wasn't just a comeback. It was a spark. And sparks have a way of lighting fires. The whispers started almost immediately. By noon, the cleaning crew was buzzing. By 2 o'clock, someone from accounting had already texted their cousin in HR. By 4, it had gone viral inside the building's private Slack channels. Did you hear what the maid said to Bennett? The story spread faster than wildfire in a dry forest. Angela, meanwhile, went back to her routine. She wiped down counters, scrubbed coffee rings off tables, and swept behind doors no one ever opened. But everything felt different now. She could feel the weight of eyes on her. Curious, startled, even respectful. And for the first time in 6 years, someone held the elevator door for her. Angela didn't want attention. She wasn't trying to make a statement. She wasn't trying to change the culture of a company that had treated her like wallpaper. She just spoke the truth. That was all. But the truth has a strange way of digging its heels into the floor. That night, Mr. Bennett sat in his leather chair, staring at the security footage. Over and over. Zoomed in. Rewound. Played again. He didn't understand it. He'd humiliated her. Why hadn't she shrunk? Why had her words hit him like a slap across the face? He tried to dismiss it, calling her ungrateful in his own head. But deep down, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Shame. The board heard about the incident the next day. One of them, a woman in her 60s who rarely spoke, leaned forward during their weekly meeting and asked, "Do you treat all your employees that way, Howard? Or just the ones who wear cleaning uniforms?" The room went silent. Mr. Bennett didn't respond. Angela arrived that morning just like any other. But something was different. Her cleaning cart had been moved from the basement storage closet to the ground floor. A small nameplate had been added to her locker. Angela M., Jackson. For most people, it was a tiny thing, a label, a name. But for Angela, it was a recognition she hadn't asked for, but deeply deserved. She didn't need praise. She didn't want a spotlight, but she had made people listen. And now, the walls that once echoed with the sounds of people ignoring her were starting to listen. The following days brought a subtle but undeniable shift in the atmosphere. Angela felt it every time she entered the building. A new kind of attention, cautious but present. Some people nodded at her in the hallways. Others held doors open without being asked. The cleaning crew whispered about the sudden change, and even the higher-ups seemed to regard her with a different kind of respect. But not everyone was pleased. Mr. Bennett's pride was wounded, and that made him unpredictable. In his glass-walled office overlooking the city, he paced back and forth, wrestling with a storm of emotions. Anger, confusion, and that unwelcome sting of shame. The very thought that a maid, someone he had dismissed for years, could speak truth to power and leave him speechless gnawed at his ego. Yet, beneath it all, there was something he couldn't ignore. The undeniable truth in her words. He had built his empire, but at what cost? One evening, after the office had emptied and the fluorescent lights dimmed, Mr. Bennett called Angela to his office. His voice, though still firm, lacked its usual harshness. "Angela," he began, "I want to understand. What made you say what you said?" She looked at him steadily, unafraid, and replied simply, "Because someone had to." That answer, so honest and unembellished, stirred something within him. Their conversation that night was the first step toward change. Not just for the two of them, but for the entire company. It sparked conversations about respect, dignity, and the human stories behind the roles people played. Angela wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a catalyst, a mirror reflecting uncomfortable truths back to those who had been blinded by power. Outside the walls of the skyscraper, word of the incident began to leak. Social media caught wind of the story, and soon, Angela's words resonated far beyond the office. People everywhere saw themselves in her courage, in her refusal to be invisible. Her sentence became a rallying cry, a reminder that everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and valued. Yet, even as she became an unlikely symbol of strength, Angela remained grounded. She still arrived early, swept the floors and wiped the windows, but now, she did so with a quiet confidence that could not be ignored. The maid who once meant nothing had become the voice of many, proving that sometimes, one sentence is all it takes to change the course of a life and a company. Angela's life didn't suddenly transform overnight, but the ripples of that one sentence spread far beyond the walls of the corporate tower. The company's culture, once rigid and cold, began to crack in places, exposing layers of inequality and unspoken prejudices that had long been ignored. Employees whispered in break rooms, sharing stories of being overlooked or dismissed. Meetings that had once been all about profits and numbers started to include conversations about respect and fairness. But it wasn't just the company that was changing. Angela herself was evolving, growing in ways she never expected. She'd spent years keeping her head down, trying to survive, but now she felt a flicker of something more powerful. Hope. It was a fragile ember at first, but it grew brighter every day. People she'd never spoken to before smiled when they saw her. The janitorial staff, once a background murmur, now exchanged stories and jokes with the administrative assistants. Even the security guards seemed to nod with newfound acknowledgement as she passed by. Yet, with change came resistance. Not everyone welcomed this shift. There were whispers behind closed doors, doubts about Angela's intentions, skepticism about whether a maid should dare speak back to a CEO. Some saw her as a troublemaker, a threat to the established order. Rumors swirled that Mr. Bennett might be planning to reprimand her or worse, let her go quietly. Angela felt the weight of those rumors like a cold shadow, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. She had learned that silence could be deadly, but her voice, carefully wielded, was a weapon. One afternoon, as Angela was cleaning the CEO's private office, Mr. Bennett surprised her. He was no longer the man who barked orders and dismissed her with contempt. His eyes, though tired, held something deeper, a mixture of remorse and determination. "Angela," he said quietly, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. It made me realize how blind I've been." She paused, dusting a shelf, and then nodded, unsure where this was going. "I want to make things right," he continued. "Not just for you, but for everyone here. Starting tomorrow, we're launching a new program to recognize the work of every employee, no matter their position. You'll help me with it." Angela blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected an invitation to join forces with the very man who had once dismissed her so cruelly. That night, as she walked home under the dim streetlights, Angela thought about the journey ahead. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Change rarely is. But she also knew that her one sentence had sparked something undeniable. A challenge to the status quo that could no longer be ignored. And sometimes, she realized, all it takes to start a revolution is the courage to speak the truth, even when the world expects you to stay silent. The morning after Mr. Bennett's surprising offer, the atmosphere inside the building felt charged with a new kind of energy. Angela arrived early, the cool autumn breeze brushing her face as she stepped through the revolving doors. The sun was just beginning to peek over the skyline, casting golden light across the city streets. For the first time in years, she felt like she was stepping into a place where her voice could matter. Her first task was to meet with the human resources team, a group she had known only by sight before. Now they welcomed her with warm smiles and open ears. They wanted to hear her story, understand her perspective, and work with her to design a program that would honor the contributions of every employee, from the janitors who cleaned the floors to the executives who signed the contracts. Angela was struck by how many of them shared stories of feeling invisible at some point in their lives. It became clear that her experience was not unique, but part of a larger pattern that the company had never addressed. The walls that once separated departments and roles began to crumble as people from different walks of life came together to create something new. Over the next few weeks, Angela found herself in meeting rooms she had never imagined entering. She spoke openly about dignity, respect, and the power of acknowledgement. Her words were raw but honest, drawing nods and thoughtful expressions from her audience. She shared stories from her own life, how she had worked tirelessly to support her family, how she had learned to keep her head down in the face of indifference, and how one moment of courage had changed everything. Meanwhile, Mr. Bennett was working behind the scenes to implement changes. He initiated training sessions for managers to foster empathy and inclusion, reviewed company policies on workplace respect, and publicly acknowledged the importance of every role within the organization. His journey from arrogance to humility became an unexpected narrative that inspired many. But the transformation was not without challenges. Some employees resisted, clinging to old habits and prejudices. There were whispered complaints and subtle acts of sabotage. Angela sometimes overheard comments meant to undermine her or dismiss the new programs as a passing trend. She felt the weight of expectation and scrutiny pressing down on her shoulders, but she refused to back down. One afternoon, during a company-wide meeting, Angela stood beside Mr. Bennett as he announced the launch of the Recognition for All initiative. The room was filled with employees from every department, their faces a mix of curiosity, hope, and skepticism. Mr. Bennett spoke candidly about the journey they were on, admitting his past mistakes and committing to building a culture where everyone's work was valued. Then it was Angela's turn. She stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. She spoke about her 6 years in the shadows, about the moment she chose to speak up, and about the power of a single sentence to change not just one life, but an entire community. Her story moved the room, drawing tears and applause. From that day on, the company began to change in tangible ways. Recognition boards went up in every office, celebrating achievements big and small. Mentorship programs were established, pairing employees across departments to share skills and support. Casual conversations replaced guarded silences in the hallways. And Angela, once invisible, became a symbol of courage and change. Outside the office, the story captured hearts worldwide. Social media shared her journey, inspiring others to find their voices in the face of injustice. Angela received messages from people who saw themselves in her struggle, who found hope in her courage, and who were ready to speak their own truths. Yet, through it all, Angela remained humble. She continued her daily work, the same routine she had always known, but now infused with a new sense of purpose. She understood that change was a process, not a moment, and she was ready to keep walking that path one step at a time, because she knew that true transformation comes not from a single sentence alone, but from the willingness to keep speaking, keep acting, and keep believing, even when the world tries to silence you. Months passed since Angela's bold confrontation with Mr. Bennet, and the changes she had ignited began to weave into the fabric of the company. Yet, transformation is never a straight line. It's a winding path filled with setbacks, breakthroughs, doubts, and moments of profound clarity. Angela felt this every day as she navigated her new role, not just as a cleaner or a symbol, but as a voice for those who had long been overlooked. Her mornings started early, like always. The building still hummed with the sounds of a city waking up, the distant honking of cars, the soft murmur of early conversations, the clatter of heels against polished floors. But Angela moved through those halls now with a quiet confidence, a subtle glow of recognition in her eyes. She had become more than the woman with a mop and a bucket. She was an agent of change. Yet, beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Some employees embraced the new culture, finding inspiration in Angela's courage and Mr. Bennet's newfound humility. Others clung to the old ways, fearful of losing their status or comfort. Rumors still floated like shadows, whispers that the initiative was a corporate ploy, that Angela was being used as a token. These whispers tested her resolve. One particularly challenging afternoon, Angela found herself face-to-face with a longtime senior executive named Collins, a man known for his brusque manner and resistance to change. "You think a few slogans and meetings will fix decades of culture?" he sneered during a heated discussion in the boardroom. "People like you aren't the reason this company thrives. Let's be honest, your role is cleaning, not leading." Angela felt the familiar sting of old prejudices, but this time, she held her ground. Looking Collins in the eye, she responded calmly, "It's not about the role you think I should play. It's about the value every person brings, whether they're in the boardroom or the break room. Respect isn't given because of a title. It's earned by how we treat each other." The room fell silent. Collins' smirk faltered, and for a moment the power dynamics shifted. Angela knew this was just one battle in a larger war, but victories like this mattered. Outside the office, Angela's story had taken on a life of its own. Documentaries featured her as a symbol of resilience. Podcasts dissected the moment that changed a corporate giant. Letters arrived from strangers across the country, sharing their own experiences with invisibility and courage. Angela read each message with gratitude and a growing sense of responsibility. Back at work, the Recognition for All initiative evolved. Employees began nominating each other for awards not based on hierarchy, but on kindness, teamwork, and integrity. Monthly town halls opened with stories from all corners of the company, highlighting unsung heroes. The air buzzed with renewed purpose. Yet, Angela never forgot the small moments, the solitary lunches, the whispered thanks from a shy intern, the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. She continued to clean the floors, not out of obligation, but with pride in the work that supported the whole. One chilly winter evening, as snow began to dust the city streets, Mr. Bennet invited Angela to a private dinner. It was not a grand gesture, but a simple meal at a modest restaurant downtown. Over steaming cups of coffee, he shared his journey, from arrogance to reflection, from isolation to connection. He confessed the loneliness of power and how Angela's courage had pierced his armor. "I was blind for too long," he said quietly. "You reminded me that leadership isn't about control. It's about service. Thank you for that." Angela smiled, feeling the weight of those words. It wasn't just about the CEO's apology. It was about the beginning of something real. As the snowflakes fell outside, Angela realized that her journey was far from over. The road ahead was long, and the fight for dignity and respect was ongoing. But now, she walked it with allies, with purpose, and with the unshakable belief that one voice, when spoken with courage, can indeed echo through the tallest towers and the coldest boardrooms. As winter gave way to spring, the company continued to evolve, but the path was anything but smooth. Angela's story had become a beacon for many, yet it also brought unexpected challenges and complex emotions. The spotlight was both a gift and a burden. She was no longer just the maid who dared to speak up. She was a symbol, a leader, and at times, a target. The early mornings and late nights blurred together as Angela balanced her daily work with speaking engagements, interviews, and mentoring sessions. She was invited to speak at community centers, schools, and even corporate seminars about dignity, courage, and the power of voice. Each story she shared reminded her of how far she had come, but also of those still waiting in the shadows. Within the company, change was accelerating. Diversity programs expanded, unconscious bias training became mandatory, and the Culture Committee, of which Angela was now a vital member, met weekly to strategize ways to foster inclusion. Yet, beneath the surface, old power dynamics lingered, subtle but persistent. Some senior executives attended trainings with skepticism. Others went through the motions without genuine commitment. One afternoon, Angela received an anonymous letter slipped under her locker door. The words were cold and biting, filled with veiled threats and reminders that not everyone wanted change. It was a stark reminder that courage often invites resistance, and progress rarely comes without conflict. Instead of retreating, Angela drew strength from her community. The cleaning staff, administrative assistants, and even some executives rallied around her, offering support and solidarity. She realized that true change wasn't about one person, it was about building a movement. That evening, Angela and Mr. Bennett met to discuss the letter. The CEO's expression was grim, but his resolve was clear. "We'll not let fear dictate our future," he said firmly. "This company stands behind you." Together, they launched a new initiative focused on safety and support for all employees, emphasizing zero tolerance for harassment and discrimination. The policy included anonymous reporting tools, counseling services, and workshops designed to empower employees at every level. Angela became a mentor to young employees who often felt overlooked or undervalued. She listened to their stories, offered advice, and encouraged them to find their own voices. Her journey from invisibility to influence inspired a generation ready to challenge the status quo. Yet, despite the momentum, Angela remained deeply connected to her roots. She continued to take pride in her work, cleaning the floors, organizing spaces, and maintaining the environment that others often ignored. She understood that respect began with honoring every task, no matter how small. One evening, during the company's annual gala, Angela was invited to share her story on stage. The room was filled with employees from every department, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of chandeliers. As she spoke about courage, dignity, and the power of a single sentence, tears glistened in many eyes. Her words resonated far beyond the company's walls. The local press covered the event, highlighting the transformative journey of a woman who refused to be invisible. Social media amplified her message, reaching thousands who found hope in her story. But the most profound change was the shift in everyday interactions. The smile from a coworker in the hallway, the genuine thank you from a manager, the respectful nod from someone who once ignored her presence. These small acts wove a new fabric of respect throughout the workplace. Angela knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but she faced it with unwavering strength. Her journey was a testament to the power of speaking truth to power, the courage to demand respect, and the belief that every voice matters. And in the quiet moments, as she swept the floors and polished the windows, Angela smiled to herself, knowing that one sentence had sparked a revolution that no one could silence. As the months turned into a year, the transformation Angela had helped ignite within the company became more visible and, at times, more complex. The initial excitement of change gave way to the realities of sustaining progress in a world that had long resisted it. But Angela, now recognized not only as a symbol but as a leader, faced these challenges head-on with an unyielding spirit. She had learned that real change wasn't a moment, it was a marathon. It required patience, persistence, and an unshakable belief in the possibility of something better. The company had instituted new policies, and diversity and inclusion initiatives were in full swing, but Angela understood that policies alone could never erase years of ingrained bias and systemic inequality. The real work was in hearts and minds. Every day brought new lessons. She witnessed moments of genuine transformation, like the hesitant manager who began actively mentoring employees from diverse backgrounds, or the team that worked late to create accessible materials for coworkers with disabilities. But she also saw setbacks. Microaggressions whispered in corners, unspoken doubts among those clinging to old hierarchies, and the slow erosion of enthusiasm when change felt difficult. Angela continued to champion the voices of those still unheard. She formed a peer support group that met regularly after work, creating a safe space for employees to share experiences, frustrations, and hopes. These meetings revealed the often invisible struggles of coworkers who felt caught between wanting to belong and fearing rejection. Angela listened deeply, offering encouragement and strategies to navigate a landscape that was still shifting beneath their feet. Her relationship with Mr. Bennett had evolved into a partnership forged in mutual respect. Though their past had been fraught with tension, their shared commitment to change had built a bridge between their worlds. They met frequently to review progress, brainstorm new initiatives, and address ongoing challenges. Mr. Bennett had become a vocal advocate for inclusivity, speaking candidly about his own growth and the mistakes he had made. Yet, Angela never lost sight of the power dynamics that still existed. She remained vigilant, knowing that change could be fragile and easily undone if not nurtured with care. She pushed for transparency in decision-making, equitable pay structures, and continuous training that went beyond surface-level sensitivity. Her goal was a culture where respect was not an exception but the norm. Outside the office, Angela's influence continued to grow. She was invited to national conferences, sharing her story and insights with audiences hungry for real-world examples of courage and transformation. Journalists sought her perspective on social justice and workplace equity. Invitations to speak came from universities, nonprofit organizations, and even government agencies. With each engagement, she carried the voices of those who still struggled to be seen and heard. But the fame that followed was bittersweet. Angela sometimes grappled with the attention, missing the quiet dignity of her former life. She often thought of her family, the sacrifices they had made, the long hours of hard work, and the dreams they had for her future. She remained grounded by the simple acts of care that had shaped her, cooking meals for loved ones, tending to her small garden, and walking the city streets with a keen eye for beauty in unexpected places. One afternoon, during a particularly challenging board meeting, Angela faced a moment that tested everything she had learned. A proposal was on the table to cut funding for some of the inclusion programs, deemed non-essential by certain executives focused on quarterly profits. The room was tense, lines drawn between those fighting for progress and those retreating to old priorities. Angela stood up, her voice steady but passionate. She shared stories from the peer support group, highlighting the human cost of rolling back initiatives that had fostered trust and belonging. She spoke of lost potential, broken spirits, and the damage done by ignoring the value of every person. Her words painted a picture that no spreadsheet could capture. The room fell silent, and for the first time that day, the executives looked beyond the bottom line. The vote was postponed, and a renewed commitment to the programs was made. It was a hard-fought victory, but one that reaffirmed the power of persistence and the necessity of speaking truth in every arena. As the sun set over the city skyline, Angela reflected on the journey. From the quiet woman cleaning floors to the voice echoing in boardrooms and auditoriums, she had traversed a path few dared to take. She understood now that her one sentence, spoken in a moment of quiet courage, was only the beginning. The real revolution was ongoing, fueled by the countless small acts of bravery and kindness that weave together to create lasting change. Angela smiled, knowing that her story was not just hers alone, but part of a larger tapestry of voices rising together, refusing to be silent any longer. By the time spring blossomed anew, Angela's presence had become an undeniable force within the company and beyond. Her journey was no longer simply about one woman's courage. It was a movement, a catalyst for a broader reckoning with the systemic inequities that had long been swept under the corporate rug. Angela's story was now interwoven with those of countless others who had found strength in her words and example. The company itself was evolving in ways that transcended the policies and programs instituted in the immediate aftermath of that fateful confrontation with Mr. Bennett. A genuine culture shift was underway, though it required constant vigilance and renewal. It was clear to Angela that progress was not linear. It was a complex dance of advances and retreats, moments of hope and despair, victories small and large. Angela had become a mentor, a counselor, and at times a mediator. Employees from all ranks sought her counsel, drawn by her empathy and the lived experience she brought to every conversation. She had cultivated a network of support groups within the company, spaces where people could speak openly about challenges they faced, from microaggressions to outright discrimination, from feeling invisible to reclaiming their voices. These groups became lifelines for many, a place where stories once silenced were finally heard. Angela's leadership within these circles went beyond advocacy. It was about creating community, fostering resilience, and nurturing hope. She listened to tales of pain and triumph alike, recognizing in each one the universal human desire to be respected and valued. Meanwhile, her relationship with Mr. Bennett continued to evolve in unexpected ways. The CEO, once a symbol of corporate arrogance, was now an outspoken ally for inclusion and respect. His transformation was genuine, born not only of public pressure but of introspection prompted by Angela's courage. Together, they co-led workshops, appeared at conferences, and addressed the board of directors on the importance of sustaining the momentum for change. Yet, Angela was keenly aware of the fragile nature of such progress. She understood that the structures of power did not dissolve overnight, and that there were entrenched interests wary of disruption. She encountered resistance in subtle forms, decisions made behind closed doors, budget cuts thinly veiled as efficiency measures, and moments where voices advocating for equity were drowned out by the noise of business as usual. One particularly challenging episode occurred during a strategic planning session when a senior executive questioned the value of continuing to fund employee resource groups. The room grew tense as voices rose in debate, with some dismissing the initiatives as soft or distractions from the company's core objectives. Angela, summoned to speak, rose calmly and shared compelling stories from the support groups, stories of employees whose lives had been transformed by belonging, whose performance and engagement had soared when they felt seen and valued. Her words resonated, bridging the gap between cold metrics and human experience. The decision to maintain, and even increase, funding for these groups was a testament to the power of storytelling and the urgency of lived truth. Beyond the office walls, Angela's influence rippled outward. Invitations to speak at industry events and social justice forums became more frequent. Her voice was amplified through articles, interviews, and podcasts, where she articulated not only her personal journey but also broader reflections on systemic inequality, dignity, and the imperative for cultural transformation. Despite the acclaim, Angela remained deeply grounded. She found solace in simple routines: morning walks in the neighborhood park, evenings spent with close friends and family, moments of quiet reflection. These anchors kept her balanced amidst the whirlwind of public attention and corporate responsibilities. One evening, during a quiet moment at home, Angela penned a letter to the young girl she once was, a letter of encouragement and hope. She wrote about the power of resilience, the importance of speaking truth even when it feels risky, and the unbreakable strength that comes from knowing one's worth. It was a message she hoped to share with others who felt unseen, unheard, or undervalued. As the company prepared to celebrate the one-year anniversary of the Recognition for All initiative, Angela felt a profound sense of accomplishment tempered by humility. The journey was far from over, but the seeds of transformation had taken root, nurtured by countless acts of courage and kindness. Standing before a crowd of colleagues, friends, and supporters, Angela reflected on how a single sentence, uttered in a moment of defiance, had ignited a revolution of respect and dignity. Her voice, once silenced by invisibility, had become a beacon of hope, and as the applause filled the room, she knew that the true power of her story was not in the words themselves, but in the lives they touched, the changes they inspired, and the legacy of courage they would leave behind. As the year progressed, Angela's impact extended beyond the confines of her company and even her city. Invitations to speak on national stages multiplied, and her story became emblematic of the broader struggle for dignity and equity in workplaces everywhere. Yet, despite the growing recognition, Angela remained rooted in the simple truths that had carried her from anonymity to influence. She understood that her journey was not just about herself, but about the countless individuals who had been invisible for far too long. The workers who swept floors, cleaned windows, prepared meals, and supported the machinery of business without acknowledgement or respect. For every spotlight that shone on her, there were thousands whose voices remained unheard. In her speeches and interviews, Angela emphasized this collective narrative. She spoke of resilience, of the quiet strength it takes to endure indignity daily, and of the transformative power of one person daring to speak out. Her message was both a call to action and a source of solace for those still navigating the shadows. Inside the company, the culture continued to shift, but Angela knew the work was ongoing. Systems and policies needed constant refinement to root out biases that had been embedded for generations. She championed transparency in hiring and promotion practices, advocated for equitable pay, and pushed for expanded support services, including mental health resources and flexible scheduling. Her role often felt like walking a tightrope, balancing advocacy with diplomacy, strength with empathy. She frequently found herself mediating between frustrated employees and cautious management, striving to bridge gaps and foster understanding. It was exhausting work, but deeply fulfilling. One particularly memorable moment came during a company-wide retreat focused on team building and vision setting. Angela was asked to lead a workshop on empathy and inclusion. She crafted exercises that encouraged participants to share personal stories, confront unconscious biases, and envision a workplace where every individual felt valued. The room was alive with emotion as colleagues connected over shared vulnerabilities and aspirations. Afterward, several senior leaders approached Angela, expressing gratitude for opening their eyes and hearts. They acknowledged that the path forward would require courage, patience, and sustained effort, but they were committed to walking it together. Angela's influence also extended into mentorship programs. She personally mentored several young employees, guiding them through the complexities of corporate life while encouraging them to hold onto their identities and values. She celebrated their successes and helped them navigate setbacks, always reminding them that their voices mattered. Outside work, Angela maintained a rich personal life. She reconnected with old friends, nurtured family bonds, and found joy in simple pleasures. A favorite book, a quiet evening with music, a walk through blooming gardens. These moments of peace fueled her resilience and reminded her of the importance of balance. Despite her growing public profile, Angela was careful to protect her privacy and well-being. She set boundaries to preserve her energy and mental health, knowing that sustaining change required self-care as much as determination. One chilly autumn evening, Angela received an invitation to testify before a government committee on workplace equality. It was an opportunity to influence policy on a national scale. Preparing her testimony, she reflected deeply on her experiences, the humiliation, the courage, the transformation, and the thousands of stories she carried with her. Standing before the committee, Angela spoke eloquently and passionately about the realities faced by workers often relegated to the background. She called for comprehensive reforms to protect workers' rights, promote diversity and inclusion, and ensure that respect was not a privilege but a fundamental right. Her testimony was met with widespread acclaim and helped catalyze legislative discussions. For Angela, it was another step in a journey that had begun with a single sentence, spoken in a moment of quiet defiance, but carrying a power far beyond what she had imagined. As she left the hearing room, Angela felt a profound sense of purpose. The road ahead remained challenging, but she was no longer walking it alone. She carried with her the voices of many, the strength of a community, and the unyielding belief that change, real, lasting change, was possible when people dared to speak their truth. The days following Angela's testimony before the government committee were filled with a whirlwind of activity and reflection. News outlets across the nation picked up her story, weaving it into larger conversations about workplace equity, systemic injustice, and the power of individual courage. Letters and messages poured in from people who had been inspired by her words. Workers from factories, offices, schools, and homes, sharing their own stories of invisibility and hope. Angela read each message carefully, feeling a deep connection to these voices from all walks of life. They reminded her that while her journey had begun in a corporate skyscraper, the fight for dignity transcended walls and titles. It was a universal struggle, touching every corner of society where people yearned to be seen and respected. Back at the company, Angela's role had shifted from that of an employee to a visionary leader. She had been appointed Director of Inclusion and Empowerment, a new position created to institutionalize the values she had championed. This role gave her the authority to influence policy at the highest levels, and she embraced the responsibility with humility and determination. The challenges were immense. Institutional inertia, budget constraints, and entrenched attitudes often slowed progress. There were days when Angela felt the weight of these obstacles keenly, when setbacks seemed to overshadow victories. But she drew strength from the community she had built, employees who believed in the cause, leaders who had grown in their understanding, and the many voices that echoed her call for justice. One of her first major initiatives was to implement comprehensive bias training for all employees, from interns to executives. The program was designed not just to educate but to engage, to challenge assumptions, encourage empathy, and foster a culture of continuous learning. Angela personally facilitated several sessions, sharing her story and inviting open dialogue. These trainings sparked difficult but necessary conversations. Employees began to confront uncomfortable truths about their own biases and the ways these biases had shaped their interactions. Some resisted, feeling defensive or skeptical, but many embraced the opportunity to grow. Over time, the company's climate began to shift in palpable ways. Meetings became more inclusive, decision-making more collaborative, and communication more respectful. Angela also spearheaded a mentorship program pairing seasoned employees with newcomers from underrepresented backgrounds. The program aimed to dismantle barriers to advancement and create pathways for leadership. She saw firsthand the transformative impact of mentorship. Confidence blossomed, talents were nurtured, and a sense of belonging deepened. Outside the company, Angela continued her advocacy. She collaborated with nonprofits, participated in panels, and contributed to research on workplace equity. Her voice was sought after for its authenticity and insight, and she used these platforms to amplify stories that often went unheard. Despite the intensity of her public role, Angela remained connected to her roots. She maintained her daily routines, found solace in quiet moments, and prioritized time with family and close friends. These practices grounded her, reminding her of the person she was beyond the spotlight. One particularly poignant moment came during a community event organized to celebrate the achievements of women in leadership. Angela was invited to speak alongside other trailblazers who had broken barriers in various fields. As she listened to their stories of perseverance and triumph, she felt a profound sense of solidarity and hope. In her own speech, Angela reflected on the power of vulnerability and the importance of lifting others as we rise. She shared how her journey, from invisibility to influence, was fueled by the courage to speak her truth and the support of a community that believed in change. Her words resonated deeply, sparking tears, laughter, and renewed commitment. Back at the office, Angela faced new challenges and opportunities. She worked tirelessly to ensure that the momentum for inclusion did not wane. She advocated for transparent career development pathways, equitable compensation, and policies supporting work-life balance. She pushed for the integration of diversity goals into the company's core business strategy, arguing that inclusion was not only a moral imperative but a driver of innovation and success. Angela's efforts began to bear fruit. Employee satisfaction scores improved, turnover rates decreased, and the company's reputation as an inclusive employer attracted diverse talent. Awards and recognitions followed, but for Angela, the real success was in the daily experiences of respect, dignity, and opportunity unfolding within the workplace. Her story, however, was not just about one company or one person. It was about a movement, a growing chorus of voices demanding justice, fairness, and humanity in every sphere of life. Angela knew there was still much work to be done, but she faced the future with unwavering resolve. As she stood before a new group of employees during an orientation session, Angela looked out at the eager faces, many of whom bore the marks of the struggles she had known all too well. She spoke to them about courage, community, and the power of one voice to spark change. And in that moment, she saw reflected back at her the hope and promise of a future where no one would be invisible, where every person's dignity would be honored, and where the simple act of speaking one sentence could indeed change the world. As Angela settled deeper into her role as Director of Inclusion and Empowerment, the weight of responsibility grew heavier, yet so did her determination. She understood that true transformation was not a series of isolated events, but a sustained commitment to dismantling long-standing structures of inequality. Her vision extended far beyond the walls of the company. She saw herself as part of a larger movement striving for justice, equity, and human dignity. One of her earliest initiatives involved collaborating with other companies in the industry to create a consortium dedicated to sharing best practices and resources on diversity and inclusion. Angela believed that change could not happen in isolation. It required collective effort and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths at every level. This consortium quickly gained momentum, with companies large and small joining the cause. Angela found herself frequently traveling, speaking at conferences, and facilitating workshops aimed at breaking down barriers across industries. Her message was consistent. Inclusion was not a checkbox, but a fundamental shift in mindset and culture. Within her own company, Angela continued to champion bold policies. She pushed for transparent salary audits, equitable promotion pathways, and enhanced parental leave policies. She worked with the legal team to strengthen protections against harassment and discrimination, ensuring that employees felt safe and supported. One challenge she faced was addressing the intersectionality of employees' experiences. Angela recognized that issues of race, gender, socioeconomic status, and disability often overlapped, creating unique barriers that required nuanced approaches. She convened focus groups and listened carefully to employees from diverse backgrounds, integrating their insights into tailored initiatives. Angela's efforts were not without resistance. Some viewed her progressive agenda as too radical or disruptive. Rumors circulated about potential pushback from powerful stakeholders resistant to change. At times, Angela felt the isolation that often accompanies leadership in transformative movements. Angela moved forward guided by an unwavering principle. Every person deserves dignity, respect, and opportunity. Despite the emotional demands and long hours, she began prioritizing self-care, rediscovering peace through painting and finding comfort in family gatherings. A powerful moment unfolded during a company retreat where Angela organized a storytelling session among employees. Maria, a first-generation immigrant, shared her experiences with cultural barriers and microaggressions. Her story touched many and led to a new company-wide initiative supporting immigrant employees with language classes and mentorship programs. Angela expanded her leadership to include community outreach, partnering with local schools and nonprofits to create career pathways for underserved youth. The company, with continued support from Mr. Bennett, grew in both values and social impact. On the 5th anniversary of the Recognition for All program, Angela reflected on how everything began with a single sentence. What once seemed small had now become the heart of the company's culture. Letters poured in from employees who credited her leadership with changing, or even saving, their lives. But Angela understood that the fight for equity is never truly over. Each victory required vigilance and renewal. She committed herself to lifelong learning, never forgetting the moment she chose to speak up despite fear. Just as things were gaining momentum, a major client threatened to end their partnership, calling the company's inclusion policies disruptive. The leadership team was divided. Angela stood before the board and, with steady voice and racing heart, defended the company's values. She shared real stories of employee transformation, emphasizing that profit without purpose is empty. Ultimately, the company chose to stand its ground, accepting financial risk in exchange for integrity. Angela led the effort to diversify the client base, aligning with partners who shared the company's vision. Internally, she deepened efforts to foster inclusion through a storytelling project where employees shared powerful, personal journeys. Jamal, a warehouse worker, told of years of discrimination before the culture shift gave him hope. His voice encouraged others to speak up, creating a workplace where vulnerability was seen as strength. Angela also championed mental health, expanding counseling, stress management workshops, and creating quiet spaces. Her leadership extended nationally, yet she remained grounded, always honest about the long journey ahead and the voices still struggling to be heard. In her personal life, she cherished simple moments, walks in the park, family birthdays, and laughter with old friends. Young women reached out, saying Angela's courage had inspired their own paths. Her impact was real and visible. When a new diversity audit exposed uneven progress, Angela didn't see failure. She saw a roadmap. She brought leaders and employees together for open, sometimes uncomfortable conversations. From this came the Culture Champions program, training staff at all levels to recognize bias and build belonging. Amidst these efforts, Angela still made room for joy. Her story, once hidden in the shadows, had become a source of light. Colleagues thanked her for creating a workplace where they felt seen, valued, and heard. But Angela knew the work was far from done. Each answered question revealed deeper complexities. The journey was ongoing, cyclical, and eternal. At the company's annual gala, Angela took the stage once more. She spoke with humility about the power of one sentence, a sentence that had broken silence and opened doors. She honored everyone who had walked beside her, from skeptics to allies. Her closing words were a mix of gratitude and challenge. Let us remember that every voice matters, every story counts, and the courage to speak can change worlds. This is not the end, but the beginning of a future we create together. As the room erupted in applause, Angela felt a deep sense of peace. The flame she had lit now burned brighter than ever, carried forward by countless hands and hearts. Later, alone on a balcony under the stars, Angela looked out over the city skyline. She thought of the quiet, unseen girl she used to be, the one who sparked a revolution with a single sentence. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers and changes everything. This story wasn't hers alone. It belonged to everyone who dared to speak, who chose to fight when it would have been easier to stay silent, who believed that dignity is a right, not a privilege. As she turned from the view, Angela smiled. The journey had been painful and beautiful, filled with triumph and trial. But it wasn't over. Each new voice, each new story, added to a growing tapestry of change. And the flame she had sparked? It was now a wildfire, unstoppable, lighting the way toward a world where no one would ever be treated like nothing again.